Welcome to the Higher Power Podcast, presented by Higher Power Sports PT, the show dedicated to helping active individuals like you unlock your full potential through expert insights on injury prevention, performance enhancement, and recovery. Kurt Kessler is a board-certified specialist in sports physical therapy and an athletic trainer. In each episode, he and his guests bring you the latest evidence-based strategies to help you move better, feel stronger, and stay injury-free. Let's learn together.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Higher Powered Podcast. Today's episode is an important one, but admittedly a challenging one for me. I'm either going to be a hero or a villain, depending on who's listening, but regardless, the information needs to get out there. We're going to dive into the depths of youth sports and the impact the current landscape is having on parents and athletes alike. So to start, let's talk about the landscape of youth sports. The industry for youth sports, that includes participation, travel, time commitment, has exploded. There is more and more demand for players to play year-round if they want to compete at the next level, and now even just to compete on their own teams. In 2014, youth sports was a $7 billion industry. 3 years later, in 2017, it was $15 billion, over doubled. In 2022, it grew to $37.5 billion. And then in 2030, it is projected to grow to be nearly $70 billion industry. That's 10x growth in 16 years, or 1,000% economy growth in just 16 years. As parents, we want to provide every opportunity for our children to succeed. I'm not quite there yet with my oldest child being 3 years old, but someday we're going to have to make some hard decisions. I graduated high school 15 years ago, and I feel like I'm living in a different world within the landscape of youth sports. I'm going to try not to sound like an old man yelling at the clouds, but if it comes out, I apologize. I personally value high school sports because you're playing for your school, you're representing your classmates, your community, the history of rivalries, all the things that country music sings about. But sadly, colleges and recruiters don't really care about any of that, and rightfully so. High school sports are designed to give kids a chance to play, and with that, you have some very serious athletes and some who are just there to be part of a team or because they just love playing without the expectation of playing in college. AAU sports have never been bigger. With AAU, you're generally getting more competitive kids playing. Scouts get to see their targets play against higher level competition, which allows them to better evaluate. Scouts get to see multiple players that they may be interested in by aggregating the best talent into one team. So I get it, but the way that it stretches and stresses these young kids is a little concerning. They're really forced to grow up quicker and really deal with stresses that most kids my age and older didn't have to deal with. For a little bit more of a faith-based perspective on this, you can check out the episode I recorded with Tim Frey, where we dive a little bit deeper into some of the stresses that youth in general are dealing with compared to the past. So how I've seen this play out in the high school setting is that so many kids are now playing a sport year-round. They play on multiple teams during the same season, whether that's high school and club soccer teams or soccer and lacrosse teams, whatever the combination may be. There are kids playing on 2 or 3 teams at the same time. And how this manifests, everyone is focused on their own team. The high school coach is focused on winning. The club coach is there to win. The second club coach or another sport is there to win. And if you're not at every practice, then I can't count on you, is kind of what the mindset is. I'll play someone who is more committed. And that seems reasonable from the coach's perspective. But when you realize 3 coaches have that same expectations for one kid, if you're not playing year round, you're going to get replaced by someone who is. At least that is what may be perceived, even in cases where it's not true. What we end up seeing is a lot more overuse injuries or pains and inflammatory responses that have a fairly gradual onset as opposed to something that just happens in a specific moment on the field. Now, how they happen, the simple answer is that the stress placed on the body system or the specific tissue is greater than the stress capacity of the athlete or that specific tissue. For an easy example, say your quad has a capacity to allow you to run 4 miles safely, but you consistently run 5 miles. At a certain point, the tissue is going to break down and become irritated because it is being pushed beyond its capacity. You can add in fatigue as well. Fatigue has been shown to decrease neuromuscular function, or the ability for the nerve and the muscle to adequately perform a movement at the desired level. For example, if I have you balance on one leg, it would be easier to do that at the beginning of practice versus having you do it after 10 sprints. Another is a lack of strength training. We'll hit this in just a minute, but basically the only way to increase a tissue's capacity is to train it to do so. If you're not strengthening or strengthening appropriately, then you're really not changing the ability to withstand more activity. And the last one is a lack of guidance in that strength training or in the rehab process. If you want to know more about the state of injury rehab in our health system, go back and listen to episodes 2 and 3. Common injuries we see in this manner are patellofemoral pain, commonly referred to as runner's knee, Osgood-Schlatter's, and patella tendinopathy. There's Little League shoulder and Little League elbow for young throwers. Shin splints is also a big one, and tendinopathies around the ankle. I'll also throw in athletic low back pain. Even though it's not always an overuse injury, it is becoming more and more common and falls under that umbrella of athletes lacking guidance in their strength training programs. So now I'm just going to give some thoughts and recommendations on how to properly frame or consider the best and most well-rounded advice that I can give. When it comes to training, whether strength, agility, practices, I just want to touch on a few training principles that are simple and might change some of the thought process around training. When training for anything, we want to perform what we call the minimal effective dose. I compare this to taking Advil. If you have a headache, you might take 1 or 2 Advil. Why don't you take more than that? Because you know if you take too much, it's not good for you. But if you take just enough, it'll make your headache go away. This same exact thing is true with training. You want to do enough to create the changes you want to see, but not so much that it is bad for you or having detrimental effects. Our culture loves volume of work. It is ingrained in us that we need to work more than 40 hours a week if you want the promotion, or X, Y, and Z, you have to work more. If you're an athlete, you have to work more than your opponent. I was in the athletic training room last year, and one of the teams was in the weight room, and a coach was yelling out, "Someone's out there working harder than you." And I get the motivating factor behind it, but I laughed because so many athletes think, if I work out more, I'll get stronger. What we need is to work smarter, not harder. Smaller doses of the right thing is more effective than larger doses of the wrong thing. So we as rehab and performance professionals need to dose our clients like a chemist finding the right formula in order to unlock someone's fitness potential. The goal is to build tissue resilience and capacity. Now, where I see a major gap, especially for youth athletes, is the over priority of games and practices and the under priority of strength training. The purpose of strength training is, yes, to get stronger, but to build your body's capacity to withstand force and become more resilient and resistant to injury. So I see kids playing on 2 or 3 teams year round and doing hardly any strength training, getting tons of reps and hours of practice, but not addressing their movement or their ability to perform better. So we run into these overuse injuries because the tissues don't have the capacity to meet the demands of 3 teams at once. It's like wanting to build a house, but not supplying the materials to build the framework or foundation. For recovery, we really hit this topic hard on episode 4 with Sarah Neal and some other podcasts that I've done very recently here. But the number one most overlooked aspect to health, sports, and fitness is recovery. If at the end of the day you plug your phone in and it only charges to 50%, are you going to get a full day's worth out of the next day? It's the same deal. We need to make sure we're letting our bodies recharge to a full 100%. And the biggest thing is sleep. We have a built-in recovery system called sleep. At night, the body drops its immune response and focuses on repairing and restoring tissue from that day. In addition to healing and growing, sleep helps with stress management and has a million other benefits. Some people have trouble with sleep because they naturally just don't sleep well, but others, especially kids, don't sleep well because of sleep hygiene. When I say sleep hygiene, this means having consistent sleep times and a consistent sleep cycle, avoiding long naps, having a consistent bedtime routine, not using electronics 30 to 60 minutes before bed, limiting caffeine. Of all those things, who hits 100%? This is not an all-encompassing list, but it hits the main ones. And the electronic one is where I fall short. The point is just that prioritizing sleep can be a powerful tool. Nutrition is also huge in providing the right fuel for participation and fuel for recovery. Episodes 9 and 10 with Angie Dye really dive deep into this topic with information from a sports dietitian. But nutrition to fuel exercise, fuel recovery, and help with inflammation and muscle building, it all goes back to what we put in our bodies. Our coach at the high school that I work for always has this saying, we get out of our bodies what we put into it. And I love that saying. And the last note here real quick is just stress management. I could really spend hours on this, but I'll just lightly touch on some main points. Managing stress can be another really easy yet powerful way to boost performance. My best advice, especially for kids, is to limit social media use. It is so powerful and influential to mental health in adolescence. Facebook, Instagram, other platforms have been forced to put practices in place to try to decrease the harm that social media has caused to young kids. And there are enough studies to validate this, which is why these platforms have been forced to make these changes. Meditation, mindfulness, exercises, along with prayer can be a great stress reliever. There are a lot of easy and accessible free apps to help with this. Even Apple Watch has a mindfulness app. And this includes breathing exercises, yoga, spending some time in calm thought. There are a lot of easy resources out there, and you don't have to invest tons and tons of time, but like 5 minutes of breathing instead of scrolling before bed or before a game can go a long way. And for those more severe cases, professional help might be warranted. So we talked about training. We talked about recovery. Let's talk a little bit about the research and volume of activity. How much is too much? This is my summary of the NATA, or the National Athletic Training Association's position statement on pediatric overuse injuries. Typically, position statements are updated roughly every 10 years. We're a little bit behind on this update here, but these are some of the most practical guidelines that I can offer. Number 1, volume of sport activity is the best predictor of overuse injuries. That shouldn't be a surprise. The more and more you do, the more likely you are to experience overuse injuries. The second point, 16 to 20 hours a week of vigorous activity is what is recommended. So that includes practice, that includes games, that includes strength training or workouts. 16 to 20 hours a week of vigorous activity is the best recommendation. Number 3, preseason and in-season programs focused on the things we talked about, especially the recovery aspect, to help keep athletes safe and healthy for participation. And number 4, this is expert opinion, which is a lesser level of evidence, but is still based on the smartest minds practicing right now. Playing multiple sports throughout the year, that's not the same sport multiple seasons, but playing multiple sports or different sports throughout the year helps to use different muscle groups. This helps with avoiding overtraining. This helps with avoiding overusing certain movement patterns. And number 5, this is the one I know there will be the most pushback on or questions about. 2 to 3 months out of the year off from playing if you play year-round. That does not have to be a one big chunk of 2 to 3 months, but just some gaps in playing. And by off, I don't mean totally sitting on the couch and doing nothing, but this is a time to try to train some of the other muscle groups or decrease your intensity of training and just getting out of season. And the last one here, number 6, kids playing high school and club at the same time or in consecutive seasons. So that means going into a club season right after high school should still follow the guidelines for the amount of time playing over the course of the year. So those high school seasons combined with club seasons combined with whatever else should still fit in that 16 to 20 hours a week of vigorous activity and allow for 2 to 3 months off of not being in a season. Those are the best recommendations based on the athletic training profession's best research and opinions. And the last thing I want to talk about here, who is driving the ship here? Who is driving the activity? Olympic gold medalist Shawn Johnson appeared on a podcast recently, and her message was, if the push is coming from the parents, that is not healthy. That will lead to burnout. That will lead to relationship strain. When I was in high school, mind you, it was a completely different landscape back then, but it kind of relates to this topic. My dad really pushed me to be my best at all times, and I'm super thankful for that now for many, many reasons. But there was a period of time during high school basketball where he saw my potential and also saw that I wasn't necessarily doing the things to reach my potential. So from his side, as a parent, it's really tough to swallow knowing that your child could be better or give more effort. On my end, there were factors that led me to no longer love the game of basketball for my first 3 years of high school. So my motivation was not the same as it was when I loved the game when I was younger. One of those factors was how much pressure my dad was putting on me. Now, it was a secondary factor or a byproduct of me not loving the situation around playing, but that just added another layer for me, and it really strained our relationship for that period of time. As an adult and a parent now, I see what he was seeing, and he now sees that the game was not worth straining our relationship over. So again, parents play a really huge role in this whole cycle or mindset. Going back to Shawn Johnson, she then says if the push is coming from the athlete, that is healthy, that is fine. And then parents can provide the resources for them to chase their passions and their dreams. I just want to wrap up here with a few takeaways. Takeaway number 1, proper strength training and guidance in strength training is severely lacking in youth sports. There is an over priority of practice and games and teams and whatever, and an under priority of strength training to improve performance and prevent injury. Number 2, recovery is often overlooked and plays a crucial role in unlocking performance and safety. And then number 3, the best evidence for preventing injuries in youth sports, the more hours you play, the more likely you are to experience overuse injuries. 16 to 20 hours per week of sports activity is the max or the sweet spot of the recommendation for athletic participation. 2 to 3 months out of the year should be out of a sports season. Multiple teams or back-to-back seasons should still follow the weekly and yearly guidelines for volume of activity. And lastly, if kids are driving the activity, that's fine. If parents are driving the activity, the volume, that is not healthy for anybody involved. Thank you all for listening today. If there are any questions, and I'm sure there will be, please feel free to reach out. I would love to help be a resource for this topic or anything similar. If you want to connect, find my information in the show notes or find me on Instagram at Higher Power Sports PT. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Higher Powered Podcast, presented by Higher Powered Sports PT. We hope you gained valuable insights on how to stay strong, move better, and prevent injury all backed by expert knowledge in sports physical therapy and athletic training. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us bring more evidence-based tips and strategies to active individuals just like you. For more resources or to connect with us, head over to hpsportspt.com. That's hpsportspt.com. Remember, you've got the power to perform at your best. Keep training smarter, recovering faster, and living stronger. Just a reminder that the content shared in this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your health or treatment plan. Thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you next time on the Higher Powered Podcast.